I had treasury agents come to my door, and I said, "What do you want? We want to talk to you." "No, I don't have nothing to talk to you." "Well, Judge so-and-so wants to see you." "No, I don't want to talk to that son of a bitch." I had the door open.
Which, unless you're being arrested, that's your right to do. That's your
no,
right to do. You can say no. You don't have to go.
I had the door open 8 inches. I had the door open. I had my AK-47 in my other hand.
Right. You always look at me like you're expecting some sort of reaction, Harry.
No.
You telling me that you're standing at your door with an AK, you notice how my face didn't change?
No.
It doesn't faze me.
No, it don't
It's
faze
to be expected.
This is what people have
I'm not surprised. You know how to get a reaction out of me now? If you said an IRS agent came to my door and I had it open 8 inches and I gave him a cupcake. Hello! Thank you for watching the New World Order broadcast. We are coming to you live from the end of the world, here in our secret underground bunker, watching out the windows as the world collapses. I am your host, the Hatman, and I'm joined in the studio today by Harry the Taxman, who I think you look a little cooler than I do tonight. I'm a little jealous.
Don't feel jealous.
Yeah, but you got a cool, like, cowboy hat. You got the sunglasses on. You got the shades. What's going on there? You turn into a coke dealer?
No, you see me prancing up and down here, talking to myself, mumbling to myself. I'm at the stage that I am quite angry at the American people.
You running up and down the halls, mumbling to yourself, is kind of par for the course. I'm used to it.
Yeah, but it's a little more than like you in the normal holidays. Holidays, I'm a miserable SOB, but now I'm really at war.
Oh, you're angrier now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What's gotten you so angry?
It's tax season.
It's tax season. That's right. This is the time of year, every year, where the American people are fleeced because of an insidious lie that reminds everybody else, reminds everybody at the same time that they're slaves and there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, so I'd say happy April Fool's Days in 2 weeks. You're the biggest fools going. You better wake up.
Well, first of all, let's start with your hat. There's something very special about your hat.
My hat is protecting me from you projecting things into my brain.
From projecting things into your brain?
Yes.
And how exactly does your hat accomplish this? So you have tinfoil lining your hat.
I was jealous that you had a hat, your brother had a hat, now I got a hat.
All right, and that's a very special hat. Yeah. So I kind of feel like I'm Professor X and you're Magneto and you're protecting yourself from my psychic vibrations.
Yeah, well, you do have magical powers.
Don't tell anybody.
Oh.
Hey, listen, my mother was over here earlier today, and she said I'm a bad influence. I mean, she's gonna...
Well, remember, we were telling her about the spirits coming into this house.
Ooh.
And she got a little perturbed.
Yeah. Well, she says she was just joking around, but I don't know. I think she thinks I'm taking you away from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I'm corrupting your mind somehow.
You can't corrupt me any more than I am.
First of all, you're double my age, and second of all, you spend your days attempting to corrupt other people. It's almost like a vocation for you.
Yes, it is.
It's your job.
It's my function in life. Disrupt the thing. I don't want to rock the ship. I want to sink the ship.
You think we need to start from scratch?
Well, we're getting a lot of views on the Survival Freedom Center.
Okay.
And
that's your Facebook
That's
page.
the website.
Your Facebook
and
page.
We got 3 women I got to meet in 2 weeks, and they want to see my paperwork, how to stop paying taxes.
Yeah. This was pretty cool. So you had a few people message you on Facebook that you've been friends with for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she said that her and a couple of her friends want to meet you for lunch.
Yes.
And find out how you beat the IRS.
They want to see my paperwork.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do it, but I'll show them. Takes 1 hour. I'll show them.
Yeah.
And they work in ShopRite.
Okay.
And we're going to be in ShopRite's lunchroom where they get free meetings. And maybe we get some of the people in ShopRite from giving them tax-exempt letters to their boss and stop paying taxes.
So you're gonna meet them in ShopRite at their job? Wow. Okay, that's kind of ballsy. That's neat. All right.
Let's start the revolution somewhere.
We'll start the revolution in ShopRite.
Yeah.
Of all places. So are they like supervisors or clerks or?
I have no idea, but I know Noel works in ShopRite.
Okay. You don't know what they do.
I have no idea what their job is.
But I'm assuming everybody who works in a ShopRite has to be a W-2 employee.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no like 1099 or anything.
No, they don't get 1099. They do W-2s.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get them away from that.
Okay. All right. So you're going to show them to start this off, for anybody who may be watching that doesn't know, you came on the podcast for the first time in episode number 3 about 4 or 5 months ago, and it was named Death and Taxes. And since I've known you, you have been an advocate for the theory, the contested fact that income taxes are actually illegal, that the amendment to the Constitution that supposedly makes income tax legal was never properly ratified, and that the IRS itself isn't necessarily
part of the government.
It's not a government agency.
No, it's not.
No, it's almost like a fictitious name, or a DBA for the ATF.
They are an audit firm out of Puerto Rico from 1933.
And you're saying that the United States gets around this legally by collecting income taxes for its citizens, treating its own citizens like citizens of a territory instead of the United States proper.
Yeah, like a piece of corporate stock. And
they accomplish this through what's commonly known as the straw man, which is when you get a birth certificate and a social security number, a fictitious corporate entity with your own name is created on your behalf by the government. So when you have a legal document that has your name in all caps, that is not actually yourself as a person.
That's not you as a person. That is a corporate entity.
Right, the corporate entity that goes by the same name. Right. So that's how they get around collecting your income taxes and treating you as if you're a citizen of a U.S. territory rather than a sovereign U.S. citizen.
U.S. territory is Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, the Philippines, the Virgin Islands, but none of the 50 states.
Right.
So therefore, you are not a U.S. citizen. U.S. citizen. It comes from the 1889 Constitution for America, not of America.
Well, you're talking about when the United States of America itself actually incorporated when it went bankrupt, which I believe was in...
It was to pay off the Civil War.
It was in the late 1800s.
Yeah, right after the Civil War, when Lincoln did making greenbacks to pay off the debt.
Right. So what happened was the United States actually defaulted on their loans. They were forced to incorporate their citizens in order to retain their borrowing power.
By the international bankers.
Right. So you wanted to get together, and I knew that we were eventually going to have another podcast, just the two of us, because tax season is coming up. And
yes, April 15th is coming up when they killed Lincoln.
Yeah, well, that's something we talked about, I think, 2 podcasts ago.
Yeah.
Now, the anniversary of Lincoln's assassination is April 15th, and that also happens to be National Tax Day, when everybody's taxes are due. And you're saying that is absolutely not a coincidence.
No, it's not an accident.
That is a fuck you from the IRS and the international bankers to the American people, because Abraham Lincoln did what that pissed them off?
He made greenbacks to pay off the debt.
So rather than borrowing money from the international banks,
he paid the debt off with greenbacks, and the banks didn't want to accept the money,
which was a U.S. currency that was based in gold.
Yes, gold standard.
Gold standard currency. So for anybody who's watching this that doesn't already know, let's set the stage a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve. Okay, so to put it bluntly and succinctly, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation.
It's a money cartel.
It's run by private banks. All of our currency is debt-based.
Yes.
It used to be backed in gold, but even when it was still on the gold standard, it's a debt currency, which means that any currency that the United States has in its possession is borrowed from the Federal Reserve through the sale of bonds, I believe, at interest.
Yes.
So if the United States says, we need $100 million, they have to borrow that money from the Federal Reserve at interest in order to spend that $100 million. Yes. And then they have to collect more money back from, the population or other countries or whatever the case may be in order to pay back that loan at interest.
And the interest never gets paid off.
And the interest can never be paid off. It's theoretically impossible for the interest to be paid off without pillaging another country.
It happened one time in 1836 with Jackson, when he destroyed the Central Bank, didn't give them their charter, and from 1836 to 1848, this country was debt-free, and you had the greatest expansion in this country. They went from the Virginia and Tennessee border all the way to California.
Mm-hmm.
And the expansion was so big, but they ended that in 1848. But that's when you didn't have no interest and no debt, and it was a free country.
Well, people could take out loans from banks, private banks, at interest, but they were personal loans. The money itself was still backed by an objective standard, the gold standard, and currency created was backed by the gold standard. So inflation, there was really no such thing as inflation. So when the Federal Reserve, any bank that's part of the Federal Reserve System, which I believe all banks are now, savings and loans as well?
Some banks are not.
Okay.
Some state banks are not. But that creature came from the creature of Jekyll Island from 1913. And that's when Vanderbilt, Morgan, Warburg, and the central banks got together and say, why are we fighting each other? Why don't we just get together and make a set of rules and we'll come run this country?
Right.
Like the mafia.
Right. Well,
that's a different story for a different time.
Well, it was Rothschild who famously said he was bragging at some sort of party in England, and he's famously quoted as saying, show me who controls the money in a country, and I care not who makes its laws,
right?
Or something
like that. And I will
like
control the buffoon that's on the throne.
And he said, I'm the one who controls the money, because at that time he basically controlled the entire monetary system in England.
Yes.
Yeah. And this was, I think this was in the mid 1800s when he said that.
And the central bank was in Berlin. He was educated in the banks of Berlin, the central banks. But if you got to remember, as you read, this also happened in 1685 in England at one time.
What happened in 1685?
Well, the banks controlled the kings and the queens, and somehow they took the power away from the kings and queens in 1685.
Well, I recently reread a really interesting book by I'm going to put it up on the screen real quick, by an author named Tracy Twyman. It's called Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge. Now, Tracy Twyman is an interesting character. Let me get a picture of her up here. That's Tracy Twyman. She was fascinated by most of the same things that you and I are fascinated by. So, quick list of her books. Some of these I've read, some of these I haven't, but I'm very interested in the Knights Templar, who were... where is this? Oh, okay. The Knights Templar were the first Christians who were sanctioned to practice usury. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Jewish people, the Catholic Church considered the practice of usury, which is lending money at interest, to be despicable and ungodly. But everybody needed this practice in order to live. So the only people that were allowed to practice usury were the Jews, because the Catholic Church said, well, their souls are already damned anyway.
Right, they're going to hell.
They're going to hell anyway. So, you know, you might as well let them do it. And in some states, Jews were forbidden from practicing any other profession except banking and usury. Right, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
They were kept out of unions, trades.
They weren't allowed to practice trades.
They weren't allowed to do that, but they were allowed to handle money.
That's the only thing they were allowed to do, because the need was so great in society for usury to exist, but the Catholic Church said it was despicable and ungodly, so they made the Jews do it in some states. That I thought was very interesting. They weren't allowed to do anything else. So some of the books that I've read by Tracy Twyman. Tracy Twyman's a type of character who I absolutely love. She has a brilliant yet paranoid mind. She's always trying to find out, you know, who's behind the curtain, who's pulling the strings. Why do things seem like they're so connected? Are they connected? Is it happenstance? What's actually going on here? I feel like I'm being played. I feel like a little bit of a slave. I need to explore this feeling. Let's find out if there's any truth to it.
That's like the Wizard of Oz when they pulled back the curtain.
Yeah, exactly.
That little puppy dog, the Tito, pulled the curtain back, and there was the wizard playing his steam machine.
Yeah, exactly. So she's really interested in things like that I'm interested in, like the occult. She's very interested in alchemy. And the book that I was reading, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, talks about, she ties money into sort of like into alchemy as a root practice that ended up with what we now have, which is a fiat money system that basically dominates the entire world. How to create gold from lead and all the different metaphors that can lead to. So some of the books that I've read by her are the first one here, Baphomet, The Temple Mystery, the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were the order of the poor Knights Templar, poor Knights of the Temple, and they were chartered from the Pope to protect the pilgrimage routes between the European nations and the Holy Land.
They gave bills of lading instead of money.
Well, they invented what we currently call checks.
Yeah.
So when you write a check, that was basically invented by the Knights Templar. Now, what happened was they were warrior monks, and they basically took all of their members from the aristocracy, from the wealthiest people in the nations, and they all had to take a vow of poverty. So what happened was, if you're an aristocrat and you want to join the Knights Templar, you have to hand over all of your wealth and property to the Knights Templar when you're initiated into their group. So they became fabulously wealthy. On top of that, they were sanctioned by the Pope to practice usury. So now they had all these vast estates and money pouring in constantly, and they made even more money on it because they were the only people that weren't Jews that were allowed to loan money to kings and queens at interest and get paid back.
Well, here's a book that deals with that. It's called The Divine Providence.
Yeah.
And it goes into the whole history of how the Catholic Church has created this mystery of money and the control of money.
Okay.
And these two guys, they explain how by international law and charters and all kinds of stuff that was issued by the Catholic Church, where wealth comes from and who has them, including the bloodline of the 13 families that run this country.
Now you're really interested in this. I've seen some conspiracy theories on the bloodlines of the 13 families, and that's something else that Tracy Twyman was really interested in.
She has a book on bloodline.
She has a book somewhere here on.
Well, you got to roll up.
I can't see it here on the screen. That's okay. Yeah. But she was really interested in that as well, and she wrote a lot about the Merovingian. Like, basically, if you've watched the Da Vinci Code or you've read the book, she was really into all that stuff, and she's saying that there's real factual basis for the Priory of Sion, the Merovingian bloodline, the Holy Grail being possibly Mary Magdalene and the bloodline that she left behind. That's Jesus' bloodline. And he was probably actually royalty. He probably wasn't a carpenter, a poor carpenter at all.
When he was born, what did they give him? They gave him gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
These kind of seem like the gifts that you would give to a prince.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the story, of course, in the Bible is that these three wise men knew that something holy or spiritual was going on with his birth. But the fact of the matter is, if the story has anything that's true about it, the gifts were probably because of his bloodline, that he came from some sort of royalty himself.
It started from the house of David all the way down, from Jesse all the way down, and I think there was like 24 bloodlines that went down until he came.
So what do you know some of the families that are supposedly in the 13 families that the 13 families that control the world?
The Bush family.
The Bush is one of them?
The Bush is one of them.
Okay.
And then again you had the Rothschilds that became the Morgans. Mm-hmm. They changed their name.
Well, no, the Rothschilds were something else, and they changed their name to Rothschild.
Yeah, but
the Morgan firm started out as Peabody, I believe.
Yeah, there was a Peabody.
Right.
There was a general. They had a guy, a general. Then in 1900, it was Warburg from Germany.
Okay.
From the Central Bank of Germany. And then there was the Central Bank of France, Central Bank of England. They were all intermarried. And it's like same thing with the Jews today. They stay married to the Jews because they want to keep everything in the family. Well, especially the Hasidic Jews.
Yeah, and that's not really an anti-Semitic thing to say. No. There's a lot of religious groups that you're not supposed to marry outside of your religious group. That's actually a really common practice. The thing that's distinctive about Jewish people, I think, is that it's not only a religion or a philosophy. It's also a bloodline. It's a tribe. Yeah,
it's a fair keep it in the family.
Well, I mean, and ancient royalty practiced that to a large extent as well. I mean, you had to marry nobility if you were nobility. I don't think that nobles were created
No.
all of that often. So, all of that wealth by necessity stayed within very specific bloodlines.
German royalty married to England.
Well, I mean, what's the Windsor, the House of Windsor?
That's another family.
They're German, and they changed their name to Windsor to ingratiate themselves to the English population, but their bloodline is German.
Well, that's the interconnection that people don't know about.
Right.
And unless you study it, you will never get down to the foundation, and you'll wonder why, who controls what, and where they started from. But you have to go way back, and unfortunately, people don't read books today. People don't show no interest, and they rather stay a sheep.
Right. Well, I know you like saying that. You're very you seem like you've soured on people much more since I've known you. Am I influencing you in this, or is it just the world at large?
I am just getting old, and I am getting
cranky.
I'm getting to be an old man, and I ain't gonna take nobody's bullshit.
Yeah, these are, I know as soon as I wake up, we're going to sit down and have a cup of coffee, and we're going to have a conversation either about how the IRS is fucking everybody, everybody's stupid, people are sheep, the world's going to hell. It's going to be one of those things. I know that's going to be my breakfast in the morning.
No, I won't give that to you in the morning.
You don't wait.
Well, we all have our good days and our bad days. The only bad days we got is I'm waiting April 15th, and I give them hell.
Right.
And I'm very disappointed that you people do not send no comments to the New World Order.
Oh, there you go.
I want comments, good, bad, or indifferent. If you think I'm crazy, send a comment. Say I'm crazy. If you think the Hatman's wrong, send him a comment. If you think my information's right, say, yeah, I've got your information, but I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Or you say, I got your information, and you terrify me. You scare me.
We would like everybody to subscribe. If you're on Rumble, follow. We got 2 new subscribers yesterday on YouTube, which is funny because we keep getting subscribers on YouTube, but our video view count is going down every time we post a video, which is strange to me. But I also saw that our Twitter account, which we haven't been doing anything with for a few weeks now because I hate social media and I'm not good at it, so I just kind of haven't been doing anything with it. And we doubled our Twitter followers in the last 2 days.
Good.
I have no idea how that happened.
Well, we're getting 2 to 4 hits every day on the Survival Freedom Center.
Okay.
I had 14 hits one day.
Oh!
They're reading the views, but please make a comment.
Yeah, I think the point is, we like comments, we like talking about them. So, me personally, I don't want to engage with anybody. If I see a bunch of comments, I'm going to take a nap. But they are fun to talk about. But Harry here and Talking Head number 5, my brother who is not with us today, are very, very stimulated by your thoughts. They do want people to engage. So like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, and if you think anything that we're talking about is interesting to your friends, share it with your friends. But getting back to the Knights Templar, well, we're saying that they basically invented the banking system. Well, what happened was peasants who were or aristocrats who were en route to the Holy Land to make their pilgrimage, they would stop at, I forget what the word is, precipitories?
Yeah,
something like that.
Respiratory.
They were places where the Templars had like a little fortification or whatever, and they had food and lodging for you and everything else. But back then, I mean, this is basically where the term highway robbery comes from. If you're traveling back then on these country roads across nations,
that was a common practice, and
you're carrying a whole bunch of gold with you, somebody's going to come along and mug you and take all your gold. It's just going to happen. So what the Knights Templar did is not only were they the first Christians that were able to practice usury, they also invented the checking system. So when you went to the first precatory or whatever it was called, I can't remember the word, you could deposit all of your gold with the Templars.
And you got a bill of lading.
Yeah, they gave you, and it was a cipher that only the Knights Templar could decode, and that made you understand that your money was safe. So you took this, what later became called a check, which was a cipher that said how much money you had in your account, and when you went to the next stop, you could go to the Templar bank and show them the check, and they would give you a withdrawal of gold, or they would give you goods and services like lodging or meals.
Or a line of credit.
Yeah, and with usury, sure. And then, they would give you a new cipher to reflect your new balance. And that's where our concept of checks comes from. It's pretty interesting.
Well, it's old history.
Yeah.
So it's not new.
But a lot of people don't know these things. So,
A lot of people are too busy trying to just survive and trying to make it. And they're not even questioning why they're in the position they are, who put them in that position, and why they put them in that position.
Yeah, and
say, bah, you're a sheep.
You're really down on people lately.
Yeah.
I think it's funny.
It's a bad season for me.
So basically you have every single holiday that you're miserable.
Yeah.
And then also tax season.
Yeah.
Which really is a few months. What months of the year are you a happy-go-lucky guy?
I don't think I have one.
You don't have even one. There's 12 to choose from.
Nah, I have no idea. I'm just miserable all the time. That keeps me on edge. And that keeps me sharp.
It keeps me sharp. It keeps me in the game.
I don't think I play the game.
Everybody's playing a game.
Well, my game is I want to bring the ship down.
Want to bring the ship down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want people to wake up.
But you said that you wanted to, because originally I think we were going to have one of your friends on who recently lost a court case. What's his name?
Well, Alan Shear has found the corruption in the Pike County Court of the Homeowner Association, the lawyers and the court, from stealing money from the homeowners and going along with the Homeowners Association. It's been going on for 25 years. They have a case called Westfalls versus Cats 25 years ago, when the guy got a $20 million RICO charge against Westfalls, and they got him on RICO charges, and he settled for $6 million, and RICO and Westfalls has to give $300,000 a year to this guy for the next 20 years.
Well, let me set the stage here with your friend. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Your friend basically was the homeowners. He lives on a lake, and the Homeowners Association was telling him that if he lives there, he now has to pay fees in order to use the lake. But the deed to his property stipulates that
he's not part of Walker Lake.
That he's not part of the association.
And that's the original deed.
The rights to use the lake are included in the deed to his house.
Because the guy gave a half acre to Walker Lake to extend the lake.
Right.
But the original owner said, I don't want to be a part of Walker Lake. I'll give you a half acre of land. I want to be exempt from Walker Lake.
And I don't know the legalities of this, but to your thinking and to his thinking, his rights to the lake should be grandfathered in because it's stipulated on the deed.
The deed.
Okay.
That's what they did. They did something to do the deed, and his first case that he won, the local judge said, you're right, you're not part of Walker Lake. And then they came back and they went to the different judge, and then the judge said, no, you're part of Walker Lake. So he got the corruption.
Right.
He spent 2 years in court, and he got worn down. So now he went to court with a camera to take pictures of things. He got arrested. They charged him with 9 counts of disturbing the peace. And
yeah. So what happened there? He walked in. He walked into the courtroom after it was empty.
Not the courtroom. You're not allowed a camera in the courtroom.
So he was trying to take pictures of something.
He was in the punitary office,
okay,
trying to get the records, which they don't have.
Okay. So this sounds like a little espionage James Bond type of shit. He walks into the office and he's trying to photograph documents.
Carrying his camera with him.
Yeah. And then an officer said, "Hey, you can't be in here."
You can't do that, and they threw the cuffs on him right away.
Yeah, and then he got charged with resisting arrest,
with disturbing the peace, and 9 other felonies
for trying to take pictures in an
They're
office.
Trying to screw him real bad,
right?
And after 2 years, Milford Court threw it out because they can't handle it because they're the culprit. It went to Wyoming County to another judge, and he challenged that judge, and that judge says, "I'm going to come to Milford and I'm going to try your case and I'm going to put you in jail."
Well, I remember I was at the post office one day and you called me, and you never call anybody, really. So I was like, "Oh my God, I hope everything's okay." And I'm picturing like FBI and IRS agents with machine guns coming to the bunker. And you're warning me not to come back, and this is your last stand or something like that.
Well, the 2 Treasury agents came down and chased them away. Right.
But anyway, to the story, so you called me, that's what's going through my head, and you just sound really angry on the phone. You go, "Hey, is there a form in the lobby of the post office that talks about taking pictures? It should look something like this." Yes. And I look, I was like, yeah, it's right there. He said, and you're like, "Take a picture of it. I need to see it. I need to see what it says." And I'm like, okay, so here's a form on the bulletin board that says, now, honestly, the wording was a little vague.
Yeah.
It's a little vague, but basically says, taking photos of anything on federal property is at the least highly discouraged. And you're asking me to take a picture of it, which I thought was funny. But I did without hesitation. I don't give a shit. What are they going to do to me? And so I did, and we looked at it, and it's strangely worded. But anyway, that's how this gentleman got felony charges against him, which is pretty wild. And we were going to have him, what's his name, Alan?
Alan.
We were going to have him on to talk about his experience. What happened to that? Is he still coming on?
No, he's taken a rest from the court case.
Okay.
And what the funny thing
But he doesn't want to come on and talk about it?
No, he'll come on the show, but he's taking a little break.
Right.
And from the 9 felonies, they dismissed the 9 felonies. They kept the disturbing the peace, which is a $300 fine, and they made a deal with the DA. He turns himself into a sheriff. He sits in jail one day. He got a $1 fine.
And you explain this to me. Why the $1 fine?
That's a point of contract.
Which means that he's accepting the judgment.
He's accepting their judgment.
Right.
Then when we went
It's funny, isn't it funny how just the exchange of $1 can be used as a contract. Now here's the funny thing. You gave me an application to go get my carrier permit. Now I've never done this before. Explain the process of getting a carrier permit, because that's the same thing.
Permit, you pay $5 to the sheriff for fingerprints. You spend $14 for the investigation, and you give him $1 in cash for the contract.
$1 in cash.
$1.
It has to be in cash.
Yes.
Because that's a contract.
That's a contract.
So legal tender makes a contract.
So what I did when I paid the court costs for Alan, and he spent 2 years in court, and the court cost was only $298. And when I gave him the check, I signed under the check. Under UCC code 10301A, which reserves all my rights under the Constitution. I gave it to the woman. She looked at it.
You wrote this on the check.
Wrote it on the check. It's like disagreeing with the judgment.
Okay.
We had to go to the Department of Probation for that.
Okay.
I didn't understand that either. And they accepted it. When they accepted it, they opened the door to a federal court case.
In your mind?
No, by law.
Are you sure about that?
Yes,
because that a check is not legal tender.
I've done that with the IRS.
Okay.
I use the UCC code.
Yeah, but I mean, writing it on a check.
Yes,
I'm not.
you
I'm
could
not.
write it on your driver's license, and if they see it on your driver's license, you're not under contract. That UCC code is what the courts operate under.
So everybody keep in mind, this is going to come up later in this conversation, that the exchange of legal tender constitutes a contract.
Yes.
Anytime legal tender is exchanged, there is by law a contract, and most people do not understand this. There's a legal contract anytime cash money changes hands. That is going to be very important to remember in this conversation. So anyway, this guy didn't make it, and we got to get something up here. And you and I were sitting around talking a couple days ago, and you said, what did you say exactly? You said, you know what? I want to do a podcast about money.
Yes.
About money. So tell me why you want to do a podcast about money, and what are some of the reason that you want to talk about it, and what are some of the points you want to bring up?
I want to wake these people of this country up that what money really is. It's just a piece of paper. It's just an idea. You think it's real, but it's not. It's debt money. It's fiat money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you live in the land of Oz. And like I said, it is just a play. It's like Monopoly money.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real.
It's a game.
It's a game. It's a big-ass game, and I'm sick and tired of playing that game. I played that game till I was 40 years old, then I woke up, and then I spent the next 27 years fighting them, and I won.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the IRS is concerned.
Right.
I got a letter from the Department of Justice. They don't want to argue my 25 legal points, so they're not interested in my case.
Mm-hmm.
I had Treasury agents come to my door, and I said, what do you want? We want to talk to you. No, I don't have nothing to talk to you. Well, Judge so-and-so wants to see you. No, I don't want to talk to that son of a bitch. I had the door open.
Which, unless you're being arrested, that's your right to do.
No,
that's your right to do. You can say no. You don't have to go.
I had the door open 8 inches. I had the door open. I had my AK-47 in my other hand.
Right. You always look at me like you're expecting some sort of reaction, Harry.
No.
You telling me that you're standing at your door with an AK, you notice how my face didn't change?
No.
It doesn't faze me.
No, it don't
it's
faze
to be expected.
This is what people
I'm not surprised. You know how to get a reaction out of me now? If you said an IRS agent came to my door and I had it open 8 inches and I gave him a cupcake, that would surprise me.
Poison.
See, then I wouldn't be surprised. That would not surprise me.
The people in California have been doing this on the foreclosures that have been going in California, and the deputy sheriffs have been getting shot because that banks were taking the houses away. These are the way some people react.
Some people are actually shooting the sheriffs when they come to foreclose.
Because they were foreclosing on the property.
That's fucking sad, man.
That is sad, but you know, these people are so desperate that they cross the line.
Well, talk to me a little bit about your concept of money and the desperation that people are feeling now, because I mean that's something that we talk about on this show quite often, and Talking Head and I have good conversations about that. It's one of the topics that we seem to unanimously agree on here at the compound, yourself included, is that there's something wrong with the system that we're currently living in. The monetary system is creating something that feels like, when you're living in it, it feels like a pressure cooker. It is a game to the senses. And it's a game that if you are not already far ahead of this game, if you're not already in your winning lap, it feels like you are destined to lose. Right. And then when you do not have the money, the number in your account, when the number of your debts is higher than the number in your account, you're made to you should be working harder.
You're in a trap.
You should be doing more. You should innovate. Go get re-educated. Learn how to do something that's going to be useful.
Send your wife to work.
Right, exactly. Well,
Send your kids to work.
Hey,
tell them to get a part-time job.
Look at that. And hey, there's the work ethic, and we all kind of are living in this society that very heavily promotes as a positive thing the work ethic. And it really seems to resonate with people in a certain way, as if to say, if you enjoy what you're doing, you're not really working. And you should feel bad about that. And if you don't have enough money, it's your fault. You should feel bad about that. You should be doing more. You should be working harder. You should be putting in more hours. You should be more innovative. You should learn new skills. And the finger pointing is always at the person who is experiencing some level of poverty, rather than putting into question a system, which is something that people invented. This is not, work and money is not dictated from on high. The Lord God did not come down to earth and say, hey, money is good, and hey, work is what you are here to do. This is something that people collectively invented in order to enrich and prosper themselves. And then it seems like that system we've created perhaps has gotten a mind of its own, and it is creating more despair than it is creating wealth and opportunity. So, but you wanted to talk about money, and you're sensing this desperation that people are in.
It's like the feudal system in England, when the king had his empire and he had his peasants, and you were living on the king's land, and you were just working there, and you had to give him 10-15% of whatever crops you do. It's like a sharecropper.
The feudal system, yeah.
The feudal system. So therefore, it's a trap. But to a point now, just look at the housing market now. All right? The things are getting a little better, and then all of a sudden the bank decides to pull the money out and raise the interest rates to 7%. Making it harder for someone to get a house.
Right, and what they're trying to do...
they're trying to say, if you work harder for the house, we may lend you the money.
What they're trying to do is decrease the cash supply. So something interesting that, a concept that's very interesting that I discovered rereading Tracy Twyman's book, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, which I'm going to pull some... I have some highlights from the book I want to talk to you about. But one thing I discovered from this is... When the Fed does that, when they increase the interest rates on their loans, what they're really doing, there has to be a balance between, it's not even goods. I always imagine that fiat currency had to match up perfectly in order to have zero inflation. Fiat currency would have to match up perfectly with a GDP. It would have to match up with the products, the goods and services that are being produced. And if there's more money being created than there is goods and services, that's how you end up with inflation. Now, that's not entirely accurate, or rather say in Tracy Twyman's view, and I tend to agree with her without doing a tremendous amount of research, it's not necessarily about the goods and services that are being created. It's about the labor that goes into it, which is interesting. So it's almost to say, when your dollar is worth less, and they're saying you have to work harder to get more of those dollars, it's actually a mathematical equation that's based upon a 40-hour work week and a minimum wage, which turns into a very simple algorithm. So the way she sees it, and it's an interesting way to think about it, is that the government is going to produce as much money as they need by borrowing it from the Federal Reserve. And an excellent quote that everybody says when they're talking about this private corporation is, think about it this way. The Federal Reserve is about as governmental as Federal Express.
Yes.
It's just a private corporation. Just because it has the word federal in it doesn't mean it's a government entity. So to her point, when they create this money by borrowing it from the Federal Reserve, the thing that's necessary to soak up that excess capital is not necessarily goods and services produced. That's simply a byproduct of the very simple algorithm of time, which is the 40-hour work week, versus the minimum wage. So if we produce $100 million, we need X amount of hours worked in order to theoretically soak up that money in order to equitize inflation. Does that make sense? Am I describing it properly?
Yeah, you're describing it because they got to balance the sheet or balance the ledger.
But that's the way they do it, which to me, I always thought that it was completely predicated upon GDP. And her point is, it doesn't matter because fiat currency is a game. And the game is a confidence game. And a lot of people don't know this either. A confidence game is where we get our phrase con man. A con man is a confidence man. So her point is that the money that's being created by the government through the Federal Reserve only has to be soaked up in labor. It's an equation of time versus minimum wage. So how many dollars are soaked up is the minimum wage versus to the hour that's worked. So that's what creates inflation. And here's why. Because human beings will lose faith, and we need faith to believe in money because it's not backed by anything anymore. Human beings will lose faith in something that comes to them too easily. So the magic of the con game that is money is the fact that you have to work for it. That's the con. You ever notice how so many people have unfulfilling jobs, shit jobs that could just as easily be thrown out and the company that they're working for would still prosper if they... So many people I know have a job where if they got fired tomorrow, that company would still be doing fine.
Yeah.
Their job is useless.
They're just a thing that's there, but they get the write-off for hiring these people, and they give you the W-2, and you make up the difference when they get the write-off.
Exactly. So
that's the game.
So the company gets to write off your salary.
Yes.
So they do not pay taxes on what they pay you. You pay taxes on what they pay you. Exactly. So they're passing the buck to the employee, and at the same time, more money gets moved through the economy, and the con game becomes stronger because there's more hours worked to soak up that excess capital. And to her point, the nature of the game is that people do not trust. They do not have faith in something that comes to them without work.
That's what they were brought up with.
Work. That's the con, is work. And it's not to say that, well, we need people to labor. We need people to labor because we need them to do things. We're at the point with AI where there's not a lot that needs to be done. What we need is to create a ton of capital, and then it has to be soaked up through labor so that people maintain their faith in this instrument. That's a fascinating way to look at it.
That's called economic slavery.
That's exactly what it is.
And that's what it is, and people don't understand that. No matter how hard they work, they don't get ahead.
Right.
Or my doctor friend just paid off a mortgage, 30 years. And he was real proud he paid off his mortgage.
Right.
All right? But you borrowed $100,000, you're paying $300,000 back. So you got.
Well, I hope it's not that much, but I see your point. Go ahead.
But that's just a number.
Hopefully 7%.
No. But the thing is, paying the mortgage off, people feel good about it. And that's why they make it hard to do that. But what about this government now? They're giving out so much free money to these immigrants. I mean, who's going to pay that bill?
Right.
Who's paying the freight?
Well, the thing is, and this is another interesting concept that Tracy brings up in her book that we're going to get into, is the occult principle of robbing from the future, the sacrifice of the child. You're sacrificing your children and your children's children and their freedom. You're sacrificing that freedom in order to print this magical gold now, to be able to use it now. You're borrowing from their future.
Well, you're talking about like Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
When my day, you could retire at 55 years old and get collected Social Security.
In your day, the husband went to work and the wife stayed home.
Right, and you had 2 kids and you were happy.
And you lived well.
And now, like my son has to work to 68 years old to get his Social Security.
Right.
So they raised the age. Now, the riots in France, they were going to raise the retirement age to 80.
No. I don't think it was that high. I think they wanted to raise it to 68, actually.
But the thing is, they
rioted.
They wanted to, and they rioted like crazy.
Yeah.
Europe's got a different attitude towards that.
Right.
But this country, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme anyway. It's a trust. They should never touch it.
Well, the interesting thing about Social Security, I saw somebody talking about this, and I take it with a grain of salt. I haven't looked into it. But somebody said that if you took all of the money that you paid into your Social Security tax throughout your working life, and you took that money and you properly invested it in the market, say at a 12% return, which is very high, granted, but it's possible to do, you would walk away at the end of your working life with something like $600,000 in your pocket, rather than subsistence living of $1,500 a month.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy.
I paid like $49,000 in Social Security during my working years. If I would have took that money and stuck it into the stock market and some good stock, I would probably have $2 million.
Right.
But you got to remember, because of the birth certificate, they have a bond on you for like $4 million that they're tapping directly. So when a company hires you and they're paying you out of your own bond, and it's not costing them anything.
Well, the government is able to borrow money from the Fed based upon the perceived value of the straw man entity, which when you get your birth certificate is created. So they say, okay, this person's labor throughout, based upon a 40-hour work week and based upon whatever the minimum wage is at the time, this person is going to be worth X amount of dollars, and we have this many people. That's how much credit we have with the Federal Reserve. That's how much inflation can be soaked up through future labor.
You're sold on something like the stock market. Your labor is being sold to the international bankers from 1913. FDR sold us into economic slavery.
Right.
When they paid off the Depression, what are you going to put up for collateral? I'll put the American people up.
Right.
Your grandchildren.
Right.
And this is what people don't know.
Right.
So therefore, we are just not but a product, and they're living off it. The 4%, 10% of the people that are super rich, they're working on this, and they got lawyers and everybody working on it, and this is the way they keep their wealth. So, but if they had to liquefy what they have, they wouldn't have their artificial wealth.
Well, it seems to me that wealth as a concept is fiat. When people have tremendous wealth, that wealth is only predicated upon the fact that they have so much more than everybody else. So it's not, if I had $10 million right now, I'd be very happy. But if everybody else in the country also had $10 million, let's say I had $10 million, but everybody else in the country had $100 million. I'm not wealthy. I'm very poor.
Right.
So wealth itself works that way.
Everything is just an idea.
Everything under fiat currency is an algorithm of checks and balances between polar energies. There's no such thing as objective value within our economy. Therefore, there can be no such thing as objective wealth.
Like my wealth is way below what the standard of upper middle class is. I think upper middle class is up to like $150,000 to $200,000. I'm below that, but I am happy what I got, and it's stable. I have control over it. These people that have all that kind of money, they got to play the game to keep it.
Right.
I mean, they cannot live in a 1,500-foot house. They got to buy a 4,000-square-foot house because they got to buy their Cadillac because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Right.
I mean, I don't give a shit what the Joneses have. I got what I got, and I'm happy with it.
Right.
Now, who else has 4 cars?
Who else do I know that has 4 cars? Nobody.
Right.
Not one person.
Right, I got 4 cars, but you know what? They're all old, they all run, and I'm happy with them. I don't have a brand new car. I don't want the note. I don't want the high insurance. So I'm not trying to keep up with the Joneses. I live I live way below my means, but I have control over it. If you could control your money, that's good. But if your money controls you, you got a problem.
Well, I think the old adage that a lot of professional money people will say is you have to make your money work for you rather than working for your money. But if money itself is a debt instrument, it seems to be, it's starting to feel like a house of cards. To our point, that Tracy made in her book that I want to get back to real quick. I want to quote from her book. In Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, she's talking about the occult. And I had a painting that I showed on the podcast before. It's called The Religious Moment. And I have a nude woman standing on a cliff, and there's a goat on the cliff in the background. And she's standing there naked with a table or like an altar in front of her that has a plate on it with a slab of raw meat. And she has a pitcher and she's pouring a liquid onto the meat. Now, people will look at it and they'll scratch their heads. What does that mean? Well, the name of the painting is The Religious Moment. And it's about magic and ritual. And about there's no reason to pour liquid on a meat. Why would you do that? Unless it has meaning to you. So the meaning behind the act, the perception that the act can alter is what's important. The act in itself is useless. And if you look at old grimoires, magical systems, especially from the medieval period, they'll tell the magician to do wild shit like find a toad during the full moon and spit in its mouth, and that'll cure you of your cough or something like that. You know, it's absurd things. Or cut off the testicles of a bull under the harvest moon and boil it with ant eggs or something. And the point is that if something comes too easily, you don't believe it. So in the book, Tracy Twyman is talking about occult traditions, and the same way that she's talking about work soaks up our excess currency, our inflation, because things that come to people too easily, they don't believe in. And this is why, in my opinion, the concept of a universal basic income has not occurred. Even though people need money to push through the economy, the money has to keep moving. Otherwise, the economy tanks. It has to trade hands. Money has to trade hands for something or other. Otherwise, the economy tanks. That's what we call a recession. So her point is that if you have to work in order to keep believing, to have faith in the money, if somebody just gives it to you for free, you're not going to have any faith in its value. It doesn't mean anything to you. So let me quote real quick from her book, okay? The reason why each of these traditions, she's talking about magical traditions, so ambiguously define the work that their system entails is because in many cases, it is really only the concept of work in and of itself that is needed. And it doesn't really matter what type of the work it is. Ritual magic often involves the incantation of barbarous names, like calling down demons and things like that, or gibberish languages, which you have to spend time to learn how to say, as well as bizarre activities like spitting in a toad's mouth or pouring liquid over raw meat, that seem to have no practical purpose. This is because their real purpose is as a sort of placebo effect. The point is that if you are willing to go through all this trouble and all this nonsense in order to achieve your end, whatever you're casting the spell for, you must really believe in the power of magic. It's like a self-convincer. If you didn't believe at the beginning of the ritual, you certainly will at the end of it. The secret philosophic fire of the alchemists is the fire of imagination. The real purpose of work in this context is to create an ego release and a suspension of disbelief. The point that she's making is that you have to work for money, and you have to work very hard to get a lot of money, and every salesman will tell you, well, that's not true. You don't have to work very hard to get a lot of money. You just have to find somebody that has a lot of money, and you have to convince them to part with their money.
They need the product.
Exactly. So you don't have actually working very hard. You'll do yourself harm. You're not going to get ahead working very hard. Now, I'm not telling anybody that if they're interested in something or they want to achieve something, that you don't have to work for it. Quite the contrary. I've worked very hard to master the skills that I supposedly have mastered. And I'm very salient of the obviousness that no matter how much I master a craft, like learning how to paint, there's always going to be somebody better than me. But I work very hard at things that I want to do. But working very hard in the pursuit of money, you're just going to do yourself harm if that's the way you perceive it. The only way to get ahead in this world is to take what somebody else has and use it wisely and widely. And if you need labor in order to fulfill that goal, you hire somebody else. You use somebody else's labor. That's the best way to do it. Working hard is not going to get you ahead. And her concept of work is like a convincer. It's kind of like if we're doing a con game and I'm trying to convince you to part with $10,000 for an investment, right? But you don't have to do anything. And I'm sitting there, you give me $10,000, I invest it in this and this, and guaranteed I can give you back $25,000. It's going to take 2 weeks. You give me $10,000 now, in 2 weeks, I'll have $25,000 for you. We're both going to come out ahead. And you're sitting there saying, this is a con. It's too easy. Now, what if I make you work for it? Let's say I give you some busy activity, like, hey, in order to get this investment, but I do need your help, okay? I have X, Y, and Z. I don't know how to do this. Do you know how to do this? And you say, yeah, I know how to do that. I know that program. I could do the spreadsheets for you. I can make a PowerPoint. Awesome. If you can get to work on that, I'll go talk to my guy. And all of a sudden, I'm needing you to do something that's difficult. You're probably a little more convinced.
That's
right?
Like the Huckleberry Finn, the guy when he paints the fence, he got somebody.
He's pretending that it's so much fun that he has all his friends do.
You can paint the fence. You can have fun doing that.
He says, no, I don't want to give you the brush. I want to paint the fence. And the more he doesn't want them to do it, the more they want to do it until he knows. Yeah, Huck Finn was that Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn?
Huck
that was
Finn was the character.
Yeah, but that was Tom Sawyer who was painting the fence.
One of the characters.
I'm pretty sure that was Tom Sawyer.
It's like if you came to me and you wanted to build a house or do some masonry work, you don't do it. I know it. Mm-hmm. So therefore, my labor, I know the masonry trade.
Right, so and that's skilled labor.
That's my skill.
That's skilled labor.
Your skill is convincing people to do that, because you got to convince them that they will profit by it.
I like people,
but I will profit because I like building masonry. I like creating the wall. I like to look at the world. The money's not the issue with me.
Right.
The creation is the issue.
Wouldn't it be nice if, and just imagine a world for a second where we are unshackled by this need for money, and AI is making this possible, very quickly making this possible, where we could create a system within which, rather than be enslaved by the very system that is supposed to make us prosper, we could actually just spend most of our time pursuing things that we're interested in.
Right, creating your artwork.
Me creating my artwork, or you building walls, or working on your house, or, well, all the things that you do now because you have a pension. But when you had to work, you were out of your house 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because you had to travel to the city and everything.
Yeah, I had to travel 8 hours, 7.5 hours by train, 8 hours work.
Yeah.
Come home, did it for 12 years.
Yeah. I mean, you barely had enough time to sleep.
Well, 4:30 in the morning, leave and get home by about 8 o'clock, have something to eat, watch some TV, go to sleep, get up 4 o'clock in the morning and start all over again.
Yeah.
I felt like a hamster in a cage.
Yeah. No shit. You start to feel a little bit like a slave,
but
right?
I had a goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
The goal was
to get that pension.
I saw that.
Right.
But you got to have a goal to follow. It's more than just surviving. It's having a direction.
Right.
Most people don't have a direction.
Right.
Or someone wants to build a classic car. Okay, they buy a junk car and they put $12,000-$15,000 into it, and they spend 3 years building this car. When they get done with it, hey, I like it, but it was a goal.
Right, exactly.
Your goal may be making money, which would be your goal. Mine is I built my goal, I got there, and now I'm resting. And I am not going any further because I don't have to.
Right.
That's the thing. When you don't have to do something, then you could get creative.
Right.
And that's more important in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe Rogan says this really well, and this is always the way that I've felt. It's not interesting to me to make a bunch of money. What's interesting to me is if I could get to the point where I no longer have to consider money, if I could pursue things regardless of whether or not they're profitable, that would be a wonderful thing. And in theory, money is supposed to be a rate of exchange in order to make sure that you are contributing something of value to your tribe. But it doesn't work that way. If I'm sure that it did in the very early days of coined money, but it doesn't anymore.
Problem with me. I always made money. Some of the things you do for money is questionable.
Right.
But making money is not the problem because someone's got to do the dirty work.
My point is that what money is supposed to do in theory, to earn a living, in theory, is supposed to make sure that you're spending some part of your time, like in let's say Native American tribes. Everybody had a purpose.
Yes.
You went out and you gathered some fruit, or you went out and you hunted. Then you had the medicine man or the shaman.
Yep.
Then you had the warriors.
Yes.
And everybody had a function. So, I mean, the point is that you have to give something of value to your tribe. Otherwise, why would your tribe want you there? That's supposed to be the function of value in exchange. But money doesn't seem to operate that way today. It seems to be exactly the opposite.
I don't think the American Indian had a monetary system.
Mm-hmm.
They may have had a barter system.
Right. Yeah, sure.
That worked.
Sure. But you can have a pure monetary system that makes certain that if all you want to do all day is sit around and jerk off, you're not going to be able to eat.
Unless you sell your sperm to the sperm bank.
Maybe somebody will buy it nowadays. Yeah, sperm bank, yeah. Or online fetishists. They'll be like, "Hey, jerk off in my wife's panties, and I'll give you $20." That exists. But it's supposed to make sure that you are contributing something. And nowadays, I mean, I'm sorry to say if this is your profession, but if you're like a secretary or a bookkeeper, and or everybody in the job in the show, The Office. You ever see that show, The Office? They all work for Dunder Mifflin, the paper salesman.
Oh no, I haven't seen it.
Their jobs are completely inconsequential. It's a shit job. They're unneeded. If that entire company tanked, better systems, like, they are always saying that they're at war with Staples because Staples has better prices and all that shit. Yeah, you're unnecessary. We don't need you. So, but they have to have a job. But they're not essential. And you talk about this all the time, like people just creating themselves jobs, but they're not giving anything of value back to the tribe. Their job is complete bullshit.
They create the job. That's why the taxation, we got H&R Block, you got Liberty Tax Service, and you got a whole bunch of these so-called tax preparers that are telling you, well, you have to fill this paper or that out, and you're ignorant, and so you don't know, so you believe them. So they get a percentage of what they take in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, if you knew the truth, then you know you didn't have to pay income tax, was voluntary, and you go to them, and they say it's voluntary. This is what the law says. They look at you like you're threatening them.
Right.
I went to H&R Block.
Well, you're threatening their job.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you're saying, yeah.
I went to H&R Block, and I went to do my zero return. I gave it to the woman. The woman looked at it, handed it back to me.
For anybody that doesn't know, your zero return is about 300 pages.
Yeah, well, I went to a CPA in Manhattan. I did the same thing. And the guy says, I can't help you.
Right.
And this guy gets paid $500 to do your tax return.
Right.
And I walked out of the office, and he gave me a dirty look. Like I opened it up, and I showed him the curtain that he was a liar.
Okay.
And when I do it to the lawyers, and when I asked the IRS agents for their pocket commission.
Yeah. You like to do that. Said,
I exposed them.
I know you like to do that.
And at that point, I know I got them, but you know what? I'm still fighting them.
Right.
Until the end, so they got tired of me. They said, leave this fucking guy alone.
But, and we all know your story, but isn't it interesting that the way that money is used today, it actually keeps people from adding things of value to the tribe more than it actually adds things of value to the tribe. So it's actually doing exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to do, in theory. And there's nothing sacred about it. It's a man-made system, and now it's really kicking our asses. It's turning us all into slaves, the way that it's used.
Mentally, if you think you're a slave, you become a slave.
Well, and here's another point that Tracy Twyman brings up in her book that I hear you talk about all the time. And she talks about the straw man and everything. Says, well, wait a second. And you say this all the time. What do you actually own? You remember saying that all the time to me? Because if you own a house...
You don't own it. You're listed as a tenant on the mortgage papers. If you don't pay your real estate tax, the county takes it away.
Well, yeah, but with the house thing, let's say you own your house outright. Right. Let's say you paid off your mortgage.
Yeah.
Can you stop working?
Not really.
Why?
Because the real estate taxes keeps going up.
The real estate taxes. Exactly.
And why does the real estate tax pay? I'm paying a school tax of $2,400. I got no kids in school. Why should I pay the tax? I have no kids in school. You're paying for somebody else's kids.
Right. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think education is something that needs to heavily be invested in. But the system we have now is bullshit. And there's an excellent documentary, if anybody's interested, called The Cartel, that's about the American education system, and it's brilliant. Seems like the more money we throw at education, the worse it gets. And there's a reason for that. It's very interesting. I'll show it to you if you ever want to watch it. But but to your point, you don't own, really, in essence, anything. No. You are the sovereign owner of almost nothing. And what is a slave by definition, other than somebody who is incapable of owning property?
That's at the beginning of this country. If you weren't a landowner, you didn't have right to vote. It was called the poll tax. I think it was up to 1840. Was it Walden wrote a book about that?
Okay.
So
I don't know anything about that. You can tell me about it.
the guy who wrote Walden Lake, the poet back in 1848 of civil disobedience.
Okay.
So I think the people 150 years ago were more enlightened than the people are today.
Well, I think that it's kind of like the frog in the slowly boiling pot.
Yeah.
If it's slow enough, the frog doesn't notice.
It's nice and warm here.
Yeah, exactly. And the frog doesn't notice until he's dead. And he still doesn't notice because he's dead. You can't notice anything when you're dead.
Nope. Well, I hope when my time comes, I go quick. Because I'm going to fight you right down to the end.
You've become something of an internet troll as of late with all the tax services. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about what you're doing online with the tax services?
The tax services that make all these promises to you, and I put the New World Order on there. I call them all liars. And every time I see them, I put the New World Order, death and taxes out there. And I had one woman come back at me. She cursed me and she said, "You don't know me. Oh, how dare you talk about that?" And I said, "Lady, no matter what you are, you're a thief." And I hit them all. So
that's kind of like your little campaign now. You're going one by one, tax service to tax service, calling them all out on their bullshit and sending them a link to death and taxes on the New World Order.
Guerrilla warfare. It's guerrilla warfare.
I love it.
And hopefully some people wake up on that.
You never know. And I think this is an important point that LeVay made. Quality is more important than quantity.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I had an insight the other night, and I was thinking about, and as an artist, anything you create, when a lot of people like it, it makes you feel good. But you know what? If only a few people end up watching anything I do or enjoying my paintings or, stuff that I create, let's look at the quality of the people that are participating. That's a far more important thing to look at than the numbers,
Yeah, wake up people are a lot more important than deadheads.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's how I sleep at night. So I wanted to go over a few quotes.
Yeah, give me a few more quotes from her.
Yeah, we can talk about it, and I guess we can wrap it up with that. So this is about, oh man, what's his first name? A British economist named John Maynard Keynes. All right.
John Maynard Keynes?
Mm-hmm.
I recognize the name.
I figured you would. So, Keynes was interested in finding a way in which the alchemy of paper money would be more than just mere trickery and illusion. He devised a way in which he believed that the government could produce as much money as he wanted to, and through fiat currency creation and fractional reserve lending. So, fractional reserve lending, for anybody that doesn't know, is if the bank gets, let's say, $10 million, they can loan out $9 million to the public. They only have to keep in reserve 1/10 of their total reserve.
Carried on their ledger book.
Exactly. Now, what happens when they loan you, let's say I have 9 people come in and each of these people borrows $1 million. What happens to my ledger book as the bank is it doesn't show that I just spent $1 million. It shows that I have another $1 million in assets because now I own your debt. So if I have $100 million and I loan out $90 million, my ledger book is going to now say my bank is worth $190 million. That is the scheme that fractional reserve lending is. So this gentleman was trying to figure that out. He's one of the first people to come up with this, if not the first person. So I'll continue. The last sentence I read, he devised a way in which he believed that the government could produce as much money as it wanted to through fiat currency creation and fractional reserve lending. This money would be merely in potentia, only potential money, until it was actually spent on goods and services. And this is what I was talking about before, where I thought that inflation was soaked up by GDP. That's what it used to be. So I'll continue. So it would remain potential money until it was actually spent on goods and services. Only when it is actually used for something does it become real. And he believed that as long as these things were produced in equal quantity to the amount of money created, inflation would not be a problem. Now, it goes on to say with this little story with Keynes that system basically collapsed very quickly.
Let's go back to the Depression in 1920. They borrowed 10% and they bought stocks. The market collapsed, and then they had to pay the debt, and they didn't have it, and they were jumping out of windows.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from.
Well, the bank called in the loans. See, here's what happens if the bank lends out a whole bunch of money it doesn't actually possess. Here's what happens. If everybody calls the bank out on the loans, you know, if they say, hey, man, I gave you all this money, like you give money to the bank first. The bank, you make a deposit, right? So that's called a run on the bank. If everybody wants their money at the same time, the bank doesn't have it. The house of cards, the Ponzi scheme is destroyed. It crumbles like a house of cards. Now, what happened during the crash was the bank called the loans. So it wasn't the depositors calling out the bank. It was the bank calling out their debtors. And everybody rushed to sell the stocks that they were buying from the loans that they got from the banks at like no interest. They rushed to sell their stocks so they could pay back the loans to the bank. They all did this at the same time. And it created a panic in the stock market.
And the bubble went boom.
And everything devalued. And then what did the banks do? They bought up all those stocks for pennies on the dollar. And then they waited for the economy to recover. And now they're worth so much more than they were worth before. They basically own everything at that point.
A little story on this piece of property. I went to the bank and took $20,000 out of my bank. I went to the real estate agent. I dropped $20,000 in front of the real estate agent. I said, I'll take it. Here's the $20,000. Oh, we can't take that. I looked at him. I said, what country you live in? I said, the price is $20,000. Here's $20,000. Do the paperwork. Oh, no, you got to put it back in the bank. And we need a paper trip. I said, listen, I just ordered $20,000 from the bank. I had to wait 3 days for them to get it from the Federal Reserve. They didn't have $20,000.
They didn't even have $20,000 in cash at your bank?
No, they didn't have $20,000 in the bank.
Jesus
I had to wait 3 days to get my money out so I could buy the property.
Wow.
And then when I take it to the real estate agent and give him this legal tender, they said they can't take it because they need a paper trip.
Jesus.
I said, that's the game.
Right.
And I said, you just lost $1,000 on the sale. So if you want it, now it's $19,000. And it was snowing, and I bought it in the wintertime. So that's another little trick of the trade.
Right.
Buy it when you're bad weather and they're not making a sale.
Yeah.
Go to a used car sales when you got a snowstorm and you look at a car. Let it snow. You can say, I'll take that car. Here's the cash. And here's a guy, he's not doing anything. So now he has to get his worker to dig the car out of the snow.
Right.
And he has to drop the price.
Mm-hmm.
Because he believes the money is worth more than it really is.
Well, it's interesting to me that you walked in with $20,000 cash to buy a house and they told you, we can't take your money. That's kind of wild. I mean, you really have to convince them to take your money, you know?
But the foreigners come in with $100,000 and buys it.
Oh, those damn foreigners.
Those damn foreigners. They brought that. Our tax money went to Europe. They brought it back. They went to Elmont, New York, and my friend was drunk. He come in Sunday morning. An Asian man was there we like your house. We like to buy your house. And he said, okay, give me $199,000. And the Chinese guy said, we'll be at in a week.
Mm.
And a week later, Chinese guy in a suit come in with a suitcase, and this old Chinese couple. And he said, well, here's the money. He looked at the money. He said, 1 minute. He opened up the bedroom door. Guess what, honey? We're moving to Orlando.
Okay.
And he sold the house and he moved down to Florida.
Okay.
But these foreigners bought the house cash.
Okay.
They'll accept cash money from the foreigners, but not from the Americans.
Oh, okay. That's the point you're making. Okay. Well, that's weird.
You try to transfer $10,000 in your bank.
Mm-hmm.
The bank has to, by law, notify the IRS.
Oh yeah. I know that.
Act.
I know that. Yeah, and that's to maintain some sort of protection against money laundering, supposedly.
Then again, you still pay by money orders, and they can't find you. That's another trick.
Oh, there you go.
Anything under $9,000, do a money order.
Yeah.
So it costs you a little money for the money order, but you know what? You ain't going to be reported to the IRS.
Right. Yeah, you have to keep it under 10,000.
That's why when we find our comic book, we have a problem. We're going to have to find some way to hide the money.
You know, Harry, I'm starting to disbelieve in your little Action Comics number one is hiding out somewhere in the bunker theory.
No,
I'm not buying
it. It's in your bedroom somewhere.
Is it?
I have to get the energy to go there and go through all the paperwork I got there.
All right, well, I'm going to go buy some, I don't know, testosterone and caffeine pills or something. We got to do something with you to get that energy.
Yeah.
We got to do, maybe you got to start drinking real coffee.
Well, when we find the comic book, I'll tell you what, we're going to have a Comcast. I'm going to bring that bottle of vodka, and I'm going to put it on that table.
Yeah.
And we are going to drink.
Ah, we'll definitely celebrate.
Right. I may match you as far as getting drunk.
We'll celebrate, definitely.
We'll celebrate.
Absolutely. Maybe if we believe it's there, it'll be there. We just have to believe.
I know it's there.
Believe.
But I got so much paperwork.
No, I know. Let's move on here. Let me tell you another quote from the book, see what you think of it. Here Tracy Twyman is talking about how money has to continually change hands, otherwise we go into a recession. And this speaks to the last point she was talking about, what Keynes tried to do in England. What this has created is an unhealthy, artificial relationship between time and money that affects our lives in a multitude of ways which we don't even fully perceive. When the economy tanks, it is described as slowing down. A recession isn't merely a lack of money in existence, but a lack of velocity. The approach that the U.S. government has taken over the last few decades to inflate the money supply while decreasing domestic production and employment leads to a distortion of time perception by the public. So that's very interesting. And I also wanted to bring up, I forgot to bring it up. Do you know when the American dollar was finally completely taken off of the gold standard? Completely.
1972.
Yes!
Tricky Dick.
You know that!
Yes.
Yes, because even though it was taken off the gold standard domestically here in the States, the International Monetary Fund was using the American dollar as the currency for the world, and they had it based on gold. Internationally, it was based on gold.
Yeah.
Tricky Dick took the dollar off the gold standard in the International Monetary Fund.
Of course, for China.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I did not know that. All right, let me go to my next quote here. There's just some things I highlighted that I thought you would really appreciate. And like I said, if you end up wanting to read the book, I'll get it for you. That's the thing that I just read about magic, how it's a con game. It's a convincer. The fact is that money can be and is created out of nothing. But in order for us to have faith that it actually exists, we need to go through some sort of travail in order to achieve it. human beings instinctively don't believe that something can be created out of nothing. They need to go through the process of work in order to satisfy the logical parts of the mind, in order to make themselves believe that creation has indeed taken place. And that's an interesting concept, that inflation is soaked up by labor, not by goods and services. Now Keynes tried to create a fiat system in Britain, whereby which the inflation was soaked up by GDP, and it failed miserably. But so far, the system that we have here, where it's not soaked up by GDP, but it's soaked up through an algorithm of time and labor, but time versus minimum wage, that seems to be working so far, but it is creating sort of like a slave state. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, this woman was far ahead of her time with all this knowledge, and it's true.
Here's something you'll like. Another quote. But tax is the way governments have devised for draining what they deem to be excess wealth from the system, not only to curtail inflation, but also to maintain the median income and average standard of living that they want, for whatever possible social and economic engineering strategy they happen to be pursuing at the time. To be an acceptable member of society, you must be a hard-working, tax-paying citizen, because that is the role that has been developed for you within the machine. However, it's not enough to sacrifice your own youth to feed the secret fire of economics alchemy. You are going to have to toss your progeny into the flames as well. What do you think of that? I thought you would love that quote.
Well, let's remember, on that note, she was 40 years old and she had an accident. It wasn't an accident. 40 years old, you don't hang yourself. So she must have made some enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like my friend Irving Schiff. He made enemies, and most of the people in the tax movement that I know, they had to pay the price. But you know what? They did it, and their points are coming out.
Well, the interesting thing that you're referring to is, I was doing research for this podcast last night, and I reread her book. But I looked her up just to do a little bit of research so I could try to give a background on her. I think Tracy Twyman is best known for a zine that she put out early in her career called Dagobert's Revenge. So I found out that she died in 2019, and I had absolutely no idea that she had passed away. She was only 40 years old. She died apparently by hanging, and I think we're going to want to look this up to make sure. I didn't look too heavily into it. There's not a lot of information online about her death. But her areas of interest were the Freemasons, the Merovingians, the bloodline, the Society of Priory of Sion, really the 13 families, the international banking cartel, the occult and the way it affects our government and our world. These were the things that she was really interested in, and she had connections in those spheres. And it's very interesting to me that she ended up, she died apparently by hanging. Now, when you are an oath breaker of the Masonic order and you expose their secrets, how are you what's the revenge that they take upon you?
According to what the Masons are, they're supposed to lay you out on there, and they're supposed to...
You're talking about the coffin ritual?
The coffin ritual.
That's actually originally from the Templars, yeah.
But like I said, it's like you get this forbidden knowledge and you try to share it with people. They don't want you to know this past history. They don't want you to know this knowledge, because then you start to think.
It seems like these people that expose a lot of these really deep secrets end up dying by hanging. And that has occult origins, secret society origins. Now, I'm not saying that the Masons are anything other than what they are nowadays. You know, I could join the Freemasons tomorrow.
Yeah.
But what I am saying, it's interesting that these people who expose these secrets die by hanging. And, it's kind of like hanging, they find their body with a noose around the neck hanging from a doorknob. How are you going to die hanging? Or, let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein for a second, for Christ's sake, I mean, come on. It's obvious.
And those two guards that were supposed to got fired or something, and they were missing on their posts.
Yeah, and the camera went down, and yeah, it's a little silly.
Hey, Hillary, are you doing your dirty work?
So, I mean, it's so obvious that whoever's doing this is sending a message. It's a warning to others. Now, was Tracy Twyman killed, or did she actually commit suicide? I don't know, but I'm certainly willing to speculate.
You could guess. You can't
I could
prove
guess.
it.
Yeah. All right, let me read another one for you. This money owed will always get exponentially larger over time because of compound interest. When people cannot make their payments any longer because they have exhausted their ability to earn or steal the magic paper that banks create at will, they default. Then the banks take ownership of their property instead and garnish their future wages. This is exactly what happened in 1933 when the U.S. government declared bankruptcy and defaulted on its debts. As I explained previously, all of the privately owned gold held by the American citizens was confiscated. It became illegal in this country to possess gold.
Yes.
You had to give it to the central bank.
Even gold certificates.
Yeah. Yeah, when America was taken off the gold standard, if you had gold certificates or physical gold, it had to be turned in to the Fed. It had to be turned in. You could go to jail if they found out you were holding on to it. That's wild. A lot of people don't know. That's forgotten history. That happened in this country. Oh, here's the thing I wanted to say before. By definition, a person who is forbidden from owning property is a slave. So I'll read the sentence before that. That is why we only own real estate, a term that indicates land belonging to the king or state, for which we pay rent in the form of property taxes. And by definition, a person who is forbidden to own property is a slave. I like the way she's looking at this. It makes sense to me. Hang on, let me see what this is.
She was a very smart lady.
Oh, here's the other thing that you talk about all the time. The status was solidified with the creation of the Social Security system, the slave status. Ostensibly, this was created to ensure that the old and frail were not left homeless by their depression-ravaged families, who were unable to take care of them. In reality, however, it turned each individual citizen into a securitized asset, owned by the banks that own the government. Each time we fill out a birth certificate for our newborn child, we are having our baby marked with a UPC code and selling it to the banking system. I told you you'd like this book.
It's on your birth certificate.
Yeah. Well, the straw man, the capital name. Right. Well, is the name on a birth certificate capitalized?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
I haven't looked at mine in a while. I'm going to have to check that out. It's interesting. All right, let me see what else I got here.
So wake up, people.
I only
got
got
a piece of property to the bank.
I only got a few more of these, but all right, here we go. All right. You must be willing to sacrifice your family, your wealth, and even your health in order to fulfill your master's wishes. We're talking about working in a economic slavery. You must anticipate his needs before he speaks them. Most importantly, you should have no personal ambition, but be overzealous in your desire to achieve your master's goals for him. If you cannot meet these requirements, there are 1,000 other eager slaves waiting to take your place. And her point here is this is what Marx talked about when he talked about overabundance of labor. When you have more labor than is needed for an economic system, you create a slave state. Because if you don't like doing it, there's 1,000 people ready and willing to take your place. And this was predicted. And Marx predicted this as the inevitable downfall of capitalism. And I'm not saying that I'm a big fan of Marx. I'm not. I'm really not. I'm not a fan of communism. I'm not a fan of money. If I was ahead of the game, maybe I'd be a fan of money. I'm a fan of what money can do potentially, but the way it's being used right now, I mean, I have to agree with almost everything she's saying. It really does feel like a slave state, you know?
Yeah, you owe to the tribe, and if you don't owe to the tribe, you're worthless.
There's so many people that do labor that's not, that work that's not, that they can't monetize, but it's important work. It's just not profitable. You know, it's very strange. That's a book I wanted to look up. Hang on, I'm getting to the bottom of the list here. Now, I think that was mainly for me. These aren't things I wanted to bring up on the podcast.
I think she was a very smart lady. She did a lot of history. The knowledge is there. People should wake up. And please, subscribe to the New World Order. We will inform you on a lot of shit you don't know. And if we got a subject that you don't know and you want us to cover it, send us a comment, please. We will cover it. Or I guarantee you, we will find out one way or the other. And it's going to get interesting. And please, go to the New World Order, Death and Taxes, and there's enough information there that you could read that you're going to get a headache reading it, but it's all true.
So I'm looking right now on Goodreads website, and I can't tell if this book is by, it looks like it's one that's by Tracy Twyman, but it looks like a little discussion group here. Mysterious deaths. Was Tracy Twyman murdered, or did she commit suicide as officially reported? What do you think other undergrounders think about the murder of Tracy Twyman, a cult researcher and author of Clock Shavings, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, and many more conspiracy-related books and articles? Let's read a little bit of this. After her mysterious death in July of 2019, a video was released on YouTube in which she details death threats against her and reveals that she had been in touch with Cappy, who himself died suddenly 2 months previous. Wow. She was apparently found hanged in her garage with her husband ruled out as a suspect. Her husband ruled out as a suspect. Her readers have no reason to suspect this was a suicide unless she was driven to it under extreme duress. But why suspect foul play? Specifics can be found elsewhere, but in brief, she had hinted strongly and publicly that she believed the parties involved in Isaac Cappy's death were the same ones who harassed her online and hacked her devices last year. Interesting. If there are child sex rings involving the rich and powerful, if it's not just Jeffrey Epstein who was or is raping girls, then Twyman was a threat to them. They didn't know how much she knew through fact-finding and how much she could figure out. So, yeah, everybody who's a fan of hers, and I've only read a few of her books, but I also know that she had certain affiliations, which I'm fond of, like Boyd Rice, who was a member of the Church of Satan and good friends with Anton LaVey, and they did some writing together. So I think she's a fascinating character, but it seems like everybody who is who's a fan of hers, that's interested in her, does not believe that this was a suicide.
No, it's not a suicide. If she was getting into the sex trade, she was hitting some powerful people.
Yeah.
And we could name names, we could guess, but Epstein was just the tip of the iceberg. And let's get that black book on who went to his island.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then,
I don't think that's ever going to be released.
Well, that's like the black book from the Butterfly Madam in New York with the.
Ooh, yeah. I think they did a movie about her that I watched.
Yeah.
She's an interesting character.
Like I said, or the Kennedy assassination. They still got that buried, and now
there's another person who wanted to go back to the gold standard. Yeah, look at what happened to him.
Now they're burying the birth certificate of Obama for 75 years. That you can't get it. You can't. It's not going to be released.
I think that's bullshit. It was already released, and that's all I know about that. I don't want to speak to that. Well, but let me ask you a question. We talk about JFK and Lincoln, and they were, in your opinion, and I'm inclined to agree, or at least speculate, they were murdered because they wanted to put the American economy back on the gold standard and take the power away from the international bankers.
Power from the international bankers.
What about Martin Luther King? Didn't you tell me something about he was starting to talk about that as well?
No, he wasn't talking about money. He was talking about people getting together and forgetting about if you're black, white, yellow, purple, whatever.
So he was never talking about the economy?
No, not about the economy.
Okay, I thought you had mentioned to me that he did.
He was talking about getting the people together, taking the racial issue out, and finding the common enemy.
Yeah, but hey, all these goddamn immigrants.
Yeah, well, like I said, they did a thing that they were trying to say that Martin Luther King was involved with a lot of sex shit.
Yeah.
He had a couple girlfriends, this and that.
Oh, well, yeah, J.R. Hoover.
You're talking about the
FBI guy. How do you fucking say his name?
J. Edgar Hoover.
J.R. Hoover?
J. Edgar Hoover had a
he had a hard-on for him.
He had a photo on everybody. And he was a gay son of a bitch.
You know, Joe Rogan actually looked that up on one of his podcasts, and that is actually most likely a rumor that was started by one person. So probably not even true.
Well, we don't know. As far as I read this research with J. Hoover, he had a partner for years.
Yeah. Which, in any case, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think the point about that story is that what it's saying is, you know, if you have a secret like that back then, that would cause a lot of mental stress, to say the least.
If we have all secrets are out, you can't touch me because my secret's out. What are you going to do? My secret's out.
Hey, listen.
I am what I am.
You remember we were talking about David Icke the other day, and I want to do a podcast just on David Icke. I need to become more familiar with his work. But here's a guy who researches and exposes all the same things that Tracy Twyman was. Now, here's why I don't think you'll ever find David Icke suicided.
No.
Because he also talks about how all the elites are actually shape-shifting reptilian aliens.
Yeah, aliens.
So it's very easy for the establishment to go, yeah, but nobody takes him seriously because he's a kook. And I think that David Icke talks about reptilian aliens so much so that he can't be taken too seriously. It's like an insurance policy to ensure he never gets taken out.
Possible.
I think that's interesting. That's the way to do it.
Anybody that's different that you think is a kook, leave him alone. Don't push his button.
Yeah. And it took David Icke his entire life to really get popular. And I think the only reason why he's had that much longevity is because, he's just kooky enough that the establishment doesn't try to harass him. so much, you know?
Well, if that's what keeps the enemy away, and he found a method to keep him away, fine.
I think it's cool.
But if you have someone that told the truth all the time, you're a threat to the system.
So let's end on this. I want to ask you one more question. In your opinion, and I think you and I basically agree on what our current economic system is. It's slavery.
Yes.
And it is there for the benefit of the creators of the game.
Right.
It's gotten to the point where it doesn't really benefit anybody else.
You
have to be so far ahead of the game in order to gain any advantage that it's absolutely ridiculous. And money as a concept is no longer doing the thing for which it was supposed to do. It's doing the opposite thing. For any young people coming up now, where a college degree is going to cost you $100,000 and you're still going to end up at McDonald's for your first job, or as things are getting worse and worse, and as AI is taking over more and more of the skilled white collar and the skilled labor jobs in our market, even driving, and it's inevitably going to take over. Do you see any way out of this system? Is there any way to come back against a system that wants to squeeze every last drop of blood out of us, but won't even give in to the concept of a universal basic income because it fears we will lose faith in the con? Is there any way out of that? Is there anything that people can do? I mean, what's your perception on that?
The people today that are going to be squeezed are going to realize the things that they value is not going to be valued a year from now. Your college degree is not going to guarantee you employment or a credibility employment that you could live on.
Yeah.
So therefore, you spent 4 years in college to flip burgers at McDonald's.
Yeah.
All right? Anybody could do that.
Right.
Now, they have to get creative into what they really want to do. They got to look into what their heart say. Well, I'd like to be a painter. Go for it. Or I'd like to be a sculptor. Or I'd like to pick up any trade or anything that you got to create and take a shot at it. You may stand a chance to make a living at it. Maybe, but you won't be a millionaire.
Right.
All right. I could do masonry work, so there's it's a trade, and it's you need it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have plumbers in this world. Someone's got to clean your toilet bowl and replace that.
Sure.
You have to have auto mechanics. You got to have something to support the system and how we live.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always be a creative brain person sitting behind a desk trying to think, how am I going to fucking screw these people?
Mm-hmm.
Wall Street brokers do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Doctors have to be a little more creative in curing disease. But the thing is, we have to get creative within ourselves to create our own world and of some value.
Yeah, I agree.
You cannot just sit there and make money your life.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
Right.
Because that money is just a piece of paper. It's a dead thing.
Well, if you do that, if you make that your primary focus, and money's important. You can't survive in this country without money. But
money is a degree of success, but not your whole life.
Right. And energy flows where attention goes. I think if you are preoccupied with it, you are lending it power. If people who are preoccupied with politics, they are lending the politicians their power. Attention is really energy more than anything else. So whatever you focus your attention on is where your power is going to go. And I think as far as survival goes, I think things are going to start getting a lot more difficult. And I agree with you that I think people have to start looking inside themselves. When somebody is not doing well, We're not living in a society anymore where that automatically means that they're lazy. We're not living in a society any longer where it means they're not trying hard enough. Those things, they're not automatics anymore. Whereas, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, you could say, hey, listen, buddy, you fucking snowflake, if you can't find work, go out on a street corner and let work find you. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that we're living at the point where people are being squeezed to where they have to make a decision. Either, I can support myself and be fucking miserable, or I can not support myself and be fucking miserable. So, am I going to work 80 hours a week and be fucking miserable, or am I going to go on some sort of economic life support and be fucking miserable? Either way, I'm fucking miserable. I might as well not work 80 hours a week. I think that as things get worse and worse, what's going to happen is we're going to have to stop pointing fingers at each other. And we're all going to have to stop pretending that we got everything figured out. I think eventually people are going to find themselves in a position where they have to pool resources. If somebody's struggling on their mortgage, and somebody else can't afford their rent, hey, fucking see if you can get a place together, pool resources. Indian people, I notice all the time that come to this country, they live 3 generations under one roof. They all live together and they pool their resources, and that's their family. Nowadays, if you're out of college, what's the next? Move out of your parents' house. Get the fuck out of here. It's time for you to go support yourself. I think we need to stop having that type of attitude, which in my opinion just comes from the want to make yourself feel like you're better than somebody else. I think that's all it is. And if people don't come together and start helping each other, where it's going to get to the point where nobody can survive on their own, because we are being squeezed.
We're all being squeezed.
People are going to have to start joining together and figuring out how best to pool the limited resources that they're being left with. I think that's the only way to survive through the crunch that's coming. The AI crunch, I think it's coming.
Yeah, well, the AI is going to remove a lot of the useful jobs we think we have.
Right.
And they're gone. And then what do you do?
Right. Yeah. And even if they keep those so-called useful jobs around, you're going to know instinctively that it's a shit job. It's not necessary. It could be done by a robot. They just artificially kept the job on the market to sustain the economy. So you're working for no reason anyway. That's not going to do good for people. That's why you have so much, it's one of the reasons you have so much drug addiction and alcoholism, I think. People know that they're not essential.
Well, a drug addict has to work very hard on getting his drugs. And if he took that energy, that as much as he did to get his drugs, and put it into his creativity and a job, he may succeed.
Touche.
But it's the energy that you put towards what your goal is.
Touche.
But you got to find what your goal is.
I gotcha.
And at certain periods, my generation, we had different goals. And we were limited. The new generation, you better wake up and really look at yourself.
I think people are going to have to start helping each other out, and I think you need to put your energy into what's going to fulfill you and your purpose. Focusing on making money and it gets harder every year, and I think that it's going to turn real unhealthy.
And inflation's going to eat everything.
Yeah. And
the people that the power play is going to just keep raising the prices up to make them feel good, and they're going to punish all the common people until, if you want a revolution, stop Social Security. Or stop the pensions to the civil service workers. You want a revolution, you'll have one.
Yeah. You'll have a geriatric revolution, but a revolution nonetheless.
January 6th is going to be a picnic compared to that. You cut people's Social Security, you're going to have a big problem.
Oh, my God. We're going to have parades of walkers. walkers and wheelchairs.
and some the children's going to be pushing their grandparents down there.
Yeah.
And is the Washington police going to start battering those old people?
Well, they already did during the George Floyd riots. That was pretty wild. I saw some old people really get their ass kicked by the police. That was wild, man. All right, let's wrap it up there. Harry, thank you very much for doing this with me. And thank you all for watching The New World Order. And just remember, we're watching you too.
Someone is watching. There are strange